Welcome, everyone, to Flipped Learning 3.0, an ongoing series about the new era of flipped learning. Thank you all for being with us today, and want to remind you that this is a 30-minute session. Today's topic, 5 proven strategies to help students who struggle. We've invited Kathy Swanger to join us. Kathy is one of the founding members of the FLGI International Faculty, a Level 2 certified flipped learning instructor who has taught for over 3 decades. Your mathful moderator today, as usual, is John Bergman, and this presentation, again, will take about 20 minutes, after which we'll take your questions. To ask a question, you'll need to click the Q&A button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and then type your questions into the text box. I will read your questions out loud and direct them to our panelist for a reply. That covers the stuff we've got to get covered before we get started. So, John and Kathy, I think we're set to go. Over to you.
Hey, it's awesome to be with you guys again. I love these briefings. First of all, quick shout out to our sponsor, Cisco, who provides the software, one of the FLGI mission partners, and in fact, all of the FLGI mission partners who do amazing work, and we encourage you to look at their stuff. You know, in the idea of flipped learning 3.0, folks, we realized that there's 5 things we didn't know, the kind of key tenets of 3.0, and we're going to focus today on point 2, that flipped learning is evolving because of 3 factors, and the 3 factors are research, classroom innovation, and technology, and we're going to focus in on classroom innovation and how Kathy is helping her students who struggle. And you know, I know this is a pain point for a lot of you teachers, is that you got kids who struggle. What do you do? And so, Kathy, take it away. I know you've got a lot of amazing things to share, so talk to us.
Okay, well, welcome. I'm Kathy Swanger. I'm from Marion, Ohio, and helping students who struggle, again, with 30 years of educational experience, more than 30 years, I have faced many, many students who struggle. And so the first question I always ask is, why are the students struggling? And there are several different reasons that I have found of why students struggle with school.
So, Kathy, let's take a look and ask them what do they think of this question? So, folks, we use this great tool, Mentimeter. So if you could open up your browser tab or something like that, go to menti.com. And what we want to do is just ask this question, why do some of your students struggle? So you go to this menti.com, type in 641651. Leave this up because we'll use this throughout the course of the day. And, yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. Distraction. Oh. Kathy, I like that thought. Distraction in our world with cell phones or a big thing or whatever, people are connected. Just because of attention deficit disorders. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
They don't want to be here. They have been sent by their parents.
I had one of those
Exactly.
today.
That's so true. Say again. What were you going to say?
I had one of those students today.
Oh, tell us about it.
Well, he was actually absent. Yesterday we had a snow day, and he was absent on Tuesday. So I simply said, hey, I missed you on Tuesday. And he looked at me and said, well, I just didn't want to come.
Oh, that's too bad. They learn at slower pace. I teach online. Some are just not motivated to pay attention. They don't prepare before they come to class. Home life concerns, Maslow before Bloom, good thought. Language difficulties, lack of social meeting their individual needs, lack of prerequisite skills. They're bored. Learning difficulties, no internet access at home, not willing to go to the library. Psychological issues that just get in the way. That's so true. It's sad.
Absolutely.
We live in a world where a lot of our students come to us, I don't know if this is the right word, but broken is the word I would use oftentimes, just from life. Poor work ethic. Just a couple more. We'll wait for a couple more. I know we had like 200 register or something like that. Not clear on expectations. Fatigue. Ooh, that's an interesting thought. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Keep typing those in because we'll be able to look at those a little later. We can come back to them. So those of you who are still filling stuff out, that'd be fine. So thanks for sharing. You know. So Kathy, what are your thoughts?
Well, there are students who struggle. It doesn't matter what type of schooling they're doing, whether it's online or in a brick and mortar. There are students who are going to struggle with all different kinds of learning. And a lot of that is because they're simply bored, or they, if they're not bored, they're just sort of overwhelmed by what school is. And so they kind of feel like they're the Sisyphus that is pushing that boulder up the hill, and it seems like it's almost an impossible task, and there's no way they can actually accomplish it. I mean, that's a group of students. It's also sort of like walking up a sand dune where you take one step up and then you take 2 steps backwards. And so they constantly feel like that. Or they're that child that's just sort of hanging on and trying to grasp any hand that they can because they feel like they're struggling and they just need somebody to help them out. And we've all seen these students. They're just, some of them are just simply bored. And I'll go back to the Mentimeter. Some of them have fatigue. And a lot of our students do not get enough sleep. And we know that there have been lots and lots of studies done recently about sleep and how important sleep is for learning. And so they either are sleep deprived, or they're just totally bored, or they're overwhelmed by everything that is being thrown at them for lots of reasons, some of which we may know and some of which we don't know. And so for those students, what we have to do is we have to mix up our teaching a little bit. We have to differentiate, and we have to help those students out and find ways to, keep them awake, find ways to engage them, and we can do that through different strategies.
And I wonder if it's easier. I know I had students in my career who it was easier to be bored than to admit that they didn't get it. It was easier to be the class clown or to act out than it was to feel inadequate that they aren't understanding the content. And sometimes it's learning difficulties and whatnot, and the behavior that we're seeing is actually a mask for, I think, an insecurity about their learning.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of kids are just simply protecting their self-esteem.
Yeah.
And so it's easier to say, I refuse to do that, than it is to say, I can't do that. And so to protect their self-esteem, they just say, well, I choose not to do it. And so, we have that. And that self-esteem is far more important than earning any grade or any letter on a report card. They just have to protect themselves.
And then, of course, you say that students who lack resources. Obviously, I know your context. You taught in a school with 100% free and reduced lunch, or free lunch. Every kid got a free breakfast at your school and lunch even. So talk to us about this.
Right. In my town, we have a lot of issues, and we had industry that is left, and so we do have a huge pocket of poverty. And so 100% of our students received a free breakfast every morning, received a free lunch, and then we actually had students who stayed after school for programs who were fed dinner, so they literally got all 3 meals at school. And so we ask students to do certain things in class, and sometimes they just lack the resources. They're hungry. It goes back to Abraham Maslow. They just absolutely are hungry, or they don't have the money to spend to do some of the projects that we want them to do, or even to purchase some of the supplies that we want them to purchase. And some of them, again, we go back to that sleep deprivation. We go back to they may not even have a home to live in. They may be going from one place or staying at a friend's house, staying at another friend's house, and school is not high on their priority list. It's more of an issue of survival than it is for school.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to look at what are some of those barriers that these students are facing. And so we have to try to find out what those barriers are. And if we know what those barriers are, then we can work around those and we can help the students to find access. If we're asking them to do something on the internet and they don't have the internet, then we need to be able to find a way for them to get access to the internet, or find a location where there's some free Wi-Fi for them to use.
And then the Mentimeter brought this out too, but we also have a lot of students who are coming to us who have, other issues that they're facing, right?
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of these issues we will never, ever know. Some of them we will, and some of those come out. But there are students who experience domestic abuse. There are students who are going through all kinds of issues. I know in my hometown and across the United States, the opioid epidemic has issues. And we may have students who have addiction issues themselves. But more importantly, we may have students whose parents have addiction issues. We have lots, in my town, we have lots of children who live with grandparents. And so it's a little different when you're living with a grandparent as a parent. The school I'm currently serving, we have lots of students who are in foster care, and foster care also has its own issues that those students have to deal with. And so again, it's all of these issues that students come with, and a lot of times we don't even know what those issues are. There are a couple popular culture resources that are out there right now. Jodi Picoult is one of my favorite authors, but she wrote a book, 19 Minutes, and this book's been around for a while. It centers around a school shooting, but that's not the main point. The main point and purpose of this book is to talk about the relationship among high school students. And it kind of started in middle school, it goes through high school, but it focuses on bullying and the issues that kids have and what they're willing to deal with and what they're willing to go through and what they're willing to hide from most adults so that most adults don't know. Yeah. I actually gave this book to a lot of my students and asked them to read it, boys and girls. And then I just asked them, I said, is this an accurate portrayal of students in high school? And they all said absolutely yes. So if you are a middle school or high school teacher, I would highly recommend that you read that book. And then another one is Wonder, the new book by R.J. Palacio, and which has now been made into a movie. And this one is a student who has a facial deformity, and he's young, he's elementary, so he's homeschooled, and then he finally goes to school for the first time. And so it's the issues that he has to deal with when he goes back to school. But what's also nice to me, besides the young man who has the facial issues, it's what is the relationship of his family around him, and while he gets all the attention, the older sister kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And then it also talks about some of her friends and some of the things that they're dealing with that, again, they're trying to hide. They don't want anybody to know about it. And all of those issues then impact their behavior, and then their behavior impacts their education.
So, Kathy, it sounds to me like what you're really trying to help us to understand is that when we have struggling students, that empathy, to have empathy for them in their situation, try to understand their situation to some degree. That's why you want us to picked up these two books so that we could understand them. Because sometimes I think it's easy, I can't be honest, to blame the students. It's their fault that they're not learning. And there's some truth to that. I get that. But to put ourselves in their shoes to understand what they're really going through will help us help our students who struggle more. Fair?
Absolutely. Very fair. And I think we need to try to understand what that is, because we need that empathy. And we need to be their supporter, and we don't, I always say I'm not my student's friend, but we can be friendly, and we can be there, and we can be supportive of those students, and then we can say, look, I care enough about you to hold you accountable, and I understand these issues, but let me help you work through these issues, and let's take care, and let's control the things we can control, because there are so many things that are outside of our control. So let's control them.
It seems like, I'll jump in here. It seems like with these images we have now on the screen, is just having more time to be with kids is the critical thing, isn't it? So that you can get to know them and have empathy for them and help them with whatever they're struggling with, whether it's math, history, or homelessness or whatever, right? So
yeah, and students aren't going to blurt out in class in a full group of students and tell you what those issues are that they're facing. But if you start working with them one-to-one, then you can actually have some of those conversations, and you can find out what some of those issues are that you never would have been able to find out when you're on the stage and you're standing up in front of them. We need these one-on-one conversations.
So that's a great setup. So let's turn it back to you guys, the audience. So let's ask you the question. So same tool, Mentimeter. Let me get it all fired up here. What would you do if you had more class time? I'm not sure it's going to work. Sorry, John realized what he did wrong. If the screen is too big, we may just have to skip this. Give me 1 minute to try fixing it, and if I can't, I will. She can't see the code. Sorry, guys. You're seeing the back end as John. There we go. So what would you do if you had the extra class time to help your struggling students is really the question that we want you to respond to. And this right here is a word cloud. Projects, activities, simulations, experience. Yeah, you were able to see it. I had to change something here. Good. This, by the way, is a word cloud, so if you say the same thing over again, it will repeat itself. Awesome. You'd like to do more projects, more simulations. Excellent. Individual attention. Awesome. Mentoring. Yeah, mentoring. Good thought. Experiments. I wonder if that's some science teachers talking about this. Coaching. Good, good. Good. Application. Activities. Remediation. Good. Bond. Oh, I like that word. Bonding with your students. One-on-one. Yeah. Some excellent thoughts here, folks. Yeah. More projects. Yeah. Field trips. Oh, that's a new one. Listening. So a lot of the, Kathy, I'm seeing a lot of sort of, deeper learning strategies, but I'm also hearing kind of the heart of the teachers, right, about, getting one-on-one and helping kids out. So I'm seeing kind of both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Kathy, from your perspective, what's the answer? What's your story?
Well, my story is, as a social studies teacher, I was always looking for, when I see the simulations on there, yes, I was always looking for some way to actually engage my students. I would get tired of listening to myself talk, and then I was like, I already know this information. Why am I just talking? I need to get my students to actively learn this. And again, people will sometimes say, well, when you're in a school with poverty, then that limits what you can do. And I found that, no, it doesn't. It puts some limitations on how you do things, but it doesn't limit what you can do. And so I found that the more actively we can engage our students, the better we are. And so what we really need to do is we need to differentiate, and we can't do the same thing over and over. So if we differentiate, then we can provide some of the resources that students need, and we can keep them interested.
Because especially with the students who struggle, what we've got going on is they need multiple ways to be taught. And if you're just standing up doing the lecture thing, that's not differentiation at all. So you have some strategies that you're a fan of from a differentiation perspective.
From a differentiation, I love sketch notes. And I will be the first to say I am not an artist. I can draw, but not very well. I usually have to label all my drawings so that anybody else can figure out what it is. But when we say you have to use words, I mean, most of us teachers, we're very verbal linguistic people, but our students aren't necessarily. So if they're doodling, if they're drawing, then use that and make them put that into a note form. And it doesn't have to be sophisticated. It doesn't have to look real nice. Some of these are pretty good drawings. They can be very simple, easy sketch notes, but let them use a different type of note-taking. There isn't really one great type of note-taking. Personally, I like Cornell notes. That works for me, but that doesn't work for my students necessarily. So let's put it in a way that they can get the content and understand what they need to understand without having to follow what I do best.
So one idea is sketch notes. I think you got a second one. Talk us about games, some games that you use.
Yeah, games are very important. The students like competition, and so Kahoot is a favorite at both of the schools that I've been in. The kids love it. They actually have to interact, and it's more individual. You can actually create groups now, but it's more of an individual thing where one student can take over and be in the lead. Quizlet Live I really, really like, because Quizlet Live forces your students to work together collaboratively in a group. So Quizlet Live, you have to have 4 devices, and each device gets a different answer. So you have to talk among your group to find out whose device has the right answer.
Oh,
and so
cool.
One's more individual, one's more collaborative for groups.
Student voice?
Student voice, we have to give students voice. They have opinions, and we have to listen to those opinions. And we have to force them to support their opinion and to say not just I believe this, but I believe this because. I mean, I used to tell my students I'm the proverbial child, the 2-year-old, and so my favorite question is why. So if you give me an answer, I'm going to say why. You give me another answer, I'm going to say why. And so we need to push them to get them to say their own things.
So, and then add music?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Music is huge. Our students love music. I mean, go into high school or middle school and see how many students have earbuds in. They love music. So let's use that as a way to help them learn. And I would come up with songs that I would connect to lessons, but then I would challenge them and say, hey, what can you find? This 9 Inch Nails song, was The Hand That Feeds. One of my students actually brought that to me and said, hey, I heard this song and I bet this would be great for the French Revolution. And
wow.
I would never have found Nine Inch Nails on my own. So we have to use the genre that they like too.
So I know that part of the answer is that you found flipped learning. So can you talk about a bit about how flipped learning is, how you're able to meet the needs and differentiation for your students? And then we'll talk about this question of what if the students are struggling?
Right. Well, flipped learning actually allowed me to have the class time and the freedom to do all of those things that were on the Mentimeter earlier, where I wanted to have a better relationship with my students. I wanted time to work with them one-on-one. I wanted time to do the simulations. I wanted time to do the projects. And so flipped learning gave me that time in class to work with all of the students and to gain those better relationships, find out more about their lives that I needed to do so that, again, I could develop that empathy and help them. But
I also know that you're a master at projects. I mean, you know, when I've interviewed you for some other things, just the knowing the different projects that you're able to do with your students, you know, which was one of the big things that people said they wanted. They wanted more time to do projects. Is it fair to say that Flipped gave you the time to do those things?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so before I was flipping, I would have time to do a few of them. And so I might get 2 or 3 done throughout the school year. And once I could flip, then I could do a lot more. And students will learn far more from doing a project than what they will ever learn from taking notes. Because
so you're a fan of Flipped
actively in it.
So you're a fan of flipped learning. You think it's a great deal. But well, let's be honest. There's some things that flipped learning. There's still kids even struggle with flipped learning. So let's sort of, you know, who struggles with flipped learning and what's the story?
What I have found is the students who struggle with flipped learning the most are the students who know how to play school really, really well. There are a group of kids who they're like, just tell me what I need to know. Tell me how you want me to do it. I will do it. I will get my grade. I will be happy. Let me go forward. It's not about the learning process. It's just about earning the grade.
And then the students who have tech issues, right?
There's a false assumption out there that all students know how to use technology, and that's just a misconception because there are students who struggle with technology. They may know how to use their cell phone, but they don't know how to use all of the apps and the different things that we are asking them to do. So there are students who are simply not good with it. They may have a tablet, they may have cell phone, computer, they may have all the gadgets, you know, and the gaming, but we still need to be able to teach them how to do the things we want them to do when we're using technology.
Awesome. So, and the kids who like the traditional classroom too sometimes struggle with flipped. And so I think that comes back to your point. It's like kids who know how to play school. And so we've got to, honestly, I think that when you move to an active learning strategy such as flipped learning, what you find is the students who don't like it, in many ways it's the best thing for them. Because sitting and getting is not the way to interact in today's world. So
right. This is a comfort zone, though. For a lot of students, sitting in rows and listening and answering questions, that's very much within their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do when we decide to do flipped learning is we have to cautiously help them to get outside of that comfort zone. And we have to make a safe environment in which they can do that. And then I'll tell you right now, there are students, right now I'm currently at Elgin Local Schools, a county school. We are a one-to-one school, and I've heard numerous times where students have come to me and said, why can't we just use pencil and paper? Why do we have to do everything on a computer? There are students who are still more comfortable writing things out and doing things old school than what they are using a computer.
You know, I don't think that's all bad, Kathy. I mean, I'm reading a book right now, and I mean, here it is. And I'm marking it up. It's got tabs. It's okay. Sometimes the best tool isn't a computer. It's a paper and a couple of sticky notes.
Absolutely. You do not have to, in order to flip your classroom, you do not have to go with all tech. There were lots and lots of great lessons that I did and still do that involve no technology whatsoever.
Absolutely.
I just think it needs to be a nice mix of the two.
Yeah. And so our ultimate goal is what? What do you think?
Our ultimate goal is to transform learning so that instead of students sitting back passively taking it in, the big jug filling up the little jug, we want to make students active learners where they are engaged in the learning and, you know, they have a new operating system, and this is their operating system where they get to have a voice and they interact with each other so that they can gain deeper learning.
Awesome. So, folks, that's the main presentation. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left. So this is time for you to ask some questions. So go into the question button, wherever it is. I can't see it, but I'm sure you can, and we'd love to hear your questions for Kathy or myself.
If you're ready to ask a question, now is the time to do it. You can ask that question by going to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and hitting the Q&A button. Go ahead then and type in your question. I will read your question to Kathy and John, and then they'll be able to answer it. We'll start with actually a question that I have for you, Kathy. I'm listening. Connect, empathize, bond, build relationships. That's how you handle struggling students. And then I hear you say, but I'm not my student's friend. How do you maintain that balance?
Well, I think we need to tell the students that we're not their friends. We're there at school, and we're their compadre, maybe we're their guide on the side. We are there to help them and to guide them, and we're there to support them in any way we can, but we also need to hold them accountable. And it's one of those, the old adage, you can't change your past, but you can change your future. And so we need to do anything and everything we can to help them. And when I say relationship, we are building that relationship, but it's more of like a parental relationship than it is a friend relationship.
Got it. Now we have a question here from Sean. He wants to know, do you have any particular strategies for dealing with students who are apathetic?
I'm going to say the apathetic students are the hardest students to reach. And what we need to do is we need to find some strategy. We need to talk to them and find one thing that they're interested in. And if we can simply find that one thing that they're interested in and then somehow tie that to our subject area and allow them to have some freedom to be able to do a project that centers around what they're interested in and not necessarily what we give them.
I'll tell you a story about that. I had a kid a number of years ago, and he was totally the apathetic kid you're describing. And so I made it a point to try to just to get to know him. I discovered he was like into cars. And I was a science teacher. And, you know, so anything that I could get that could relate to what we were learning about cars, you know, and I think ultimately what it came down to is he realized I cared enough to try and figure out the application to cars and explain that to him. And then he like became a star student. He began to really work for me, but I had to find that hook. For him, the hook was something to do with automobiles. So,
and very good. Thank you, John. I'm sorry, Kathy. We're going to respond again.
I was just going to say one other thing. I've actually asked my students this question, and what motivates you? And their number one answer is the teacher that cares about me. If I know the teacher cares about me, then I'm willing to work for that teacher. But if the teacher doesn't care about me, then I don't care to do their work.
Got it. Now, here's an interesting question from Marika. She says, so what advice do you have for students of privilege who've been sent there by their parents? And she's talking about a school in which very wealthy parents send their kids to her school to learn, but the kids really don't want to be there. She says her faculty struggles to connect with these students and they get frustrated. What advice do you have for her?
That's the other end of the, I mean, some of those students still have a little apathy. And again, I think it goes back to, we've got to find out what is it that motivates that student. And, you know, they may have all the resources, but they need the people in their lives that care about them and hold them accountable.
You know, the last school that I worked at was the most affluent public school in the state of Illinois. And, you know, we had the poor little rich kids who were being raised by their nannies. It was a K-8 school, so I think in Marika's case, they're older students. But I still would go back to the issue of relationships, as they realized that there's somebody who did care, and it wasn't just the nanny, you know, because they're being raised by the nanny, not the parents. That made the difference in those kids' lives. So there's probably other strategies, you know, getting to know their passions and this and that. But that's a particularly hard thing. I totally get that. So.
Another question from Magnus. Students with ADHD sometimes have difficulty sitting still in classrooms or even coming to school. What kind of strategies do you have that could apply to these kids?
In my current situation right now, I'm working in a digital media center, and we actually have bicycles that are called workstation bicycles. They're only $200, but the students can sit and pedal, and then they have a desk on the top so that they can sit, pedal, and work. So that's a little bit for the ADHD. They also, I just saw on TV, they have these new bands that kind of look like bungee cords that you can put on the desk. They put their feet on it, and they can bounce that, so there's actually movement. Those would be two strategies.
Well, I have ADHD, and I've got my fidget spinner, so I believe in fidget spinners. So here I am with my fidget spinner. I don't know, yeah, something to keep me busy, or I get squirrel.
Got it. Victor has a question. He's appreciating what we've talked about so far. It sounds like he's new to flipped learning, and he's asking, how long will it take to get this kind of process into the teaching system? Quote, how long will it take him to learn the ropes?
I'll take that. The answer is you can go on the fast track. You know, if you want to become, good at playing the guitar, then the more committed you are to playing the guitar, the more practice that you do, the better you'll get. So I'd encourage you to get some good flipped training. We've got certification courses that a lot of people have found out, and you can sort of fast track it or slow track it. There's a lot of ways for you to do it. So really, it's up to you, Victor. So.
Well, thank you both. We are out of time. Kathy Swanger, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your brilliance with us today. If you'd like to keep this conversation going, you can do so by heading over to flglobal.org/community. Reminder, you can learn more about flipped learning and get flipped learning training by becoming flipped learning certified. And you can learn more about that by going to flglobal.org/get certified. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today, as always, and more importantly, thank you for everything that you're doing to contribute to the advance of flipped learning around the world. Thank you all for connecting. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.